Get a better broadcast, podcast and voiceover voice. I'm Peter Stewart. So, how fast can we speak and how fast can we listen? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's show. In just 600 milliseconds, the human brain can think of a word, apply the rules of grammar to it, and send it to the mouth to be spoken. Just one factoid amongst several that I've discovered for today's podcast. That one from livescience.com. So, if that's how fast we can speak, how fast can we listen? Well, the average rate of speech for an American, according to this factoid, is about 125 words per minute. Obviously, it depends on the context and the content. If you're familiar with the content, like someone rattling off Shakespeare's soliloquy or at a cattle market auction, if you're familiar with the kinds of words they're likely to be saying or the exact words that they are likely to be saying, then you're more likely to understand it, obviously, than if you've been to a Shakespeare show for the very first time. The human brain can process about twice that speed, so upwards of 250 words a minute. In fact, I came across one factoid that said 275 words a minute, and another one that said our brains internally yammer along at 400 words a minute. That's how fast you can actually listen. So, given that humans can process spoken dialogue at least twice as fast as someone else can speak it, kind of makes sense that listening to podcasts at 1.5 times speed very often makes sense, particularly if the podcast is slowly spoken when it was originated, when it was actually recorded. But the problem, and I hinted at this a few moments ago, the problem seems to be training our brain to recognise unfamiliar speech patterns. Quote, word recognition drops about 40% when audio is played back twice as fast. It's a quote from Uri Hassan, who's a Princeton neuroscientist. And of course, listening fast can also reduce the effort that went into producing the podcast. Let me explain. Although I listen to some roundtable and interview podcasts at 2x speed because they've been recorded really slowly, people are talking quite slowly and considering the words that they're using. You can really speed that up and get through them in half the time, literally. I wouldn't listen to the fantastic 20,000 Hertz podcast at 2x speed because of its really high production values. That they'd be lost to me if I listen at speed. 20,000 Hertz, if you haven't come across it, well, worth checking out if you're interested in sound. It's the stories behind everyday sounds that we're familiar with, and there's a lot of high-end production values in that, where they mix those original sounds and other sounds that contribute towards it within that podcast. So obviously listening really, really fast, you would miss that kind of context of what it is they're talking about. You would miss that whole experience. If you listen fast, you've heard the content, but have you felt it? You've consumed it, but have you comprehended it? I'm back tomorrow with more. From London, I'm Peter Stewart.